Okay, we're back here. I'm bringing our guests back. So, again, as I was saying, we had just gotten up to that part where, and thanks for giving us detailed history. We walked through this whole process of your lifestyle from a youth, through young adulthood, all the chronic illnesses. You had really conquered some major addictions. I mean, God led you to give up the smoking and illicit drugs and all of those things, which were major accomplishments in themselves. But then, here you are on standard American diet, stressful work, and that whole concept of total healthy living really had not seeped through. And I guess, as they say, God was not done with you yet, as the saying goes. And so, bigger battle. So you, real quick, were you diagnosed with cirrhosis? Did you know about the liver cirrhosis, or the Hep C, before you knew about the liver cancer?
No, all those times I was going to the doctors, getting blood tests and whatnot. The indicators were there when I had to find out for myself. The indicators were there: high testosterone off the charts. Other issues. My liver enzymes, they weren't particularly elevated, but slightly. And then, I was going to a lot of different doctors to find out about this testosterone, and that's a big indicator. And it turns out this gastroenterologist said, he told me later, he said, man, everybody that was raised in the 60s needs to be tested for hepatitis C. In fact, he told my doctor that,
Oh, wow.
just because the sexual experiences and the illicit drug use.
Wow.
Yeah, everybody.
I'm glad you mentioned the liver enzymes being only slightly elevated, because, many doctors, when they check for liver function tests, they'll check the LFTs. And if the LFTs look okay, then they say, well, the liver's okay. And that can be very misleading. My mother died from liver failure. And
Really?
it was her situation was that, she had a meningioma, which was very easily surgically resected. She had chronic illness, diabetes, and all that, standard American diet, and so on. And of course, I ended up caring for her. This is before I knew what I knew. In fact, on her deathbed, I started learning this stuff. Wow. But to make a long story short, is that her LFTs were always normal or very close to normal. And there was never a question about liver. Now, she was on maybe 10 drugs that were cleared by the liver. The standard American diet with substances and preservatives cleared by the liver. So she had end-stage liver cirrhosis near the time of her death. And what brought it out was that, after the surgery, they put her on anticonvulsive medications prophylactically, and those things would wipe her out. She couldn't metabolize it.
Yeah.
And they continued to try different things with antibiotics and different things, infections and all. And it essentially sort of killed her liver. And that's what led to her demise. And so it was an eye-opener for me. And now, even my practice now, to look at liver function, I don't just look at liver enzymes. I look at the PTNI-NR, I look at albumin level, and I look at ammonia level. And if 2 or 3 of those are slightly off, that tells me that the hepatocellular function is off. Now, it's not 100% perfect. It's not, going to diagnose everything, but it gives you a decent look at function. Of course, I do imaging studies as well. Now, I always have a high suspicion if somebody's been on a lot of medications and a lot of, substances that would harm the liver. I treat it with a high degree of suspicion. And anything that's a little off related to the liver, we're going to be very cautious to try to address that. And so it's interesting that you have a similar story, because, the liver enzymes were almost normal. And I noticed that on your records. I noticed that you had alpha-fetoprotein levels through the roof, and the liver enzymes were just almost normal. And the doctors will look at that and say, okay, liver's fine. and it couldn't be anything further from the truth. So I thought that was
back then they weren't even testing for the alpha-fetoprotein because the LFTs were normal. So it wasn't until I learned that I had the cancer that they started testing for AFP.
Yeah, and that's really appropriate. It's typically used as a marker to follow, not necessarily diagnostic. There are other things that can cause an elevated alpha-fetoprotein. Dr. Palmer, I think you see alpha-fetoproteins in some of your normal patients, right?
Yeah, we don't really test a whole lot.
Yeah, but it could be elevated in babies up until they're 1 year old. So we can, but yeah, we don't. It's something we don't. I don't. Of course, cardiologists don't test a lot, but anyway. So take us to your diagnosis. So this had been overlooked for some time.
Mm-hmm.
Take us to that moment. Honestly, here you had some abdominal pain or something. You were diagnosed. You went to the hospital at night enduring severe abdominal pain. Take us to that time and what happened? What led you going to the hospital and what happened with the diagnosis?
This was the second time I'd had abdominal pain, but this one was more severe. It was in August of 2013. And I crawled around on the floor all night praying because this pain was so severe. I had some pain medicine, and generally I would, because I'd had severe arthritis too, in hips and back. And so I had to use some of that pain medicine. And I had to take 5 times as much as I would normally take. And just to assuage the pain, just a little bit. So it kind of cleared up the next day, and I reluctantly told my wife what I'd been doing all night. And she said, "Hey, you're going to the hospital right now."
You said reluctantly. I like that. Oh, by the way, Nicole Caldwell says she can't believe you're 71. I think you're 73. Is that right?
73, yes.
73. So you're right. She's not 71, 73. But you say you look and sound much younger. So there you go.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. So you told your wife, and what happened after that?
So we went to Sibley Hospital here in Washington, D.C., which is one of the better hospitals, and they ran me through all kinds of tests, ultrasound, MRI, CAT scan, and they diagnosed me with liver cancer, hepatocellular cancer, and cirrhosis as well. And so, man, I'm okay. It's my time. My dad died at 66 from a cancer. My mom died at 84 from a cancer. She died in my arms, by the way. I took care of her.
Wow.
And the cancer, I said, well, it's my time.
Huh.
So I went home and started making end of life plans. Then I prayed. And I said, God, I'm not ready to go now. Extend my life. And I'll run for you again. And I started researching because I'm an IT guy. And I started researching whether, because I went to 3 sets of doctors, by the way, at the same time. One out of Sibley, which is ruled by the John Hopkins system. So they had a doctor, a surgeon in Baltimore at John Hopkins University. He wanted to cut half my liver out.
Wow.
And let it regrow, you know, the cancerous part. So put him on hold, went to the Georgetown doctors, Lombardi Cancer Center. They wanted to put me on a chemotherapy right away. Put them on hold, went to another set of doctors at the urging of a nurse friend of mine who's, by the way, had colon cancer. And they wanted to do radiation, chemotherapy, and surgery. So I said, hey, wait a minute. Something's wrong here. The doctors couldn't concur, and these are all renowned doctors. So I'm researching myself. So I'm finding.
Well, I'm sorry. What odds did they give you?
What?
What odds did they give you? Let me turn mine.
Oh, 6 months to live.
Even with the surgery or radiation or chemo.
6% chance to live 6 months.
That's with the treatment.
Well, yeah, that's if I didn't do anything.
Gotcha. Okay. What odds did they give you for the surgery? Did the surgeon say you can cure it?
They didn't. They didn't give me any odds. Nobody gave me any odds except the last doctor, who said, "We're just trying to get you 5 years. We're just trying to get you 5 years." Which is standard for cancer. They can get you 5 years. They can mark you down as a success.
That's right. That's for their data.
Right.
They keep you along for 5 years. Once they get you there, then it's like, okay, we're good.
So he gave me he had a patient in the waiting room at the same time he was talking to me, and he pointed to her, and she looked sick as a dog. Wait a minute, I can't. If that's a success, I don't want to be that kind of success. I was already sick. I was very sick, and so I kept researching, and I kept running across these hits about natural treatment. The Gerson therapy, other places that did it. And naturally, I ran across Chris Beat Cancer, and Chris Beat Cancer has got a great site like you do. He's got a YouTube channel, and what he does is give testimonies. The people are there giving their testimonies. So there was a lot of them. So this stuff is starting to sink in, but I'm still moving slow. And then I got sick again, very sick, and I had to go into the hospital. They kept me, I think it was 16 days at Georgetown. And meanwhile, I know some stuff by then. So I'm not eating the food. I knew that was the epitome of the standard American diet. And I'm not drinking what they're saying. I'm on IV antibiotics then because it's a bile duct issue. And so I'm getting sicker, but I'm not eating that. My wife is bringing me in things, and bringing me in juice here and there. Right.
So you started.
Get out of there.
Now you took from the Gerson, so you saw the Gerson program online and you started following their recommendations, correct?
Slowly. That hospital visit got me to do it in earnest. Right?
Oh, really?
Yeah, that hospital visit got me serious. So,
wow.
And I'm sick. Then, I had to go to the grocery store, come home and rest. Unpack the groceries, go and rest. Prepare the materials for the juices because my wife is working. Prepare the materials, the prep, and go rest, and then juice and drink some and go rest. But I started feeling better almost immediately.
Mr.
Almost immediately.
Were you doing 100% juice?
100% juice. What I could eat? No. What I could eat, I was eating according to the Gerson recommendations. So raw food, some cooked food, cooked carrots, potatoes, some other things, and oil free, completely oil free. And then I found out that salads would make me feel good. Leading up to this, I learned that certain foods would make me sicker. This was before I had to go in the hospital, and before I started even doing the research. Fish, I eat cod, would make me sick. Eggs would make me sick, and after 2 or 3 times, I had to cut it out. I have to cut it out, and some other things because I'd stopped red meat and chicken would make me sick, these kind of things. So I would cut them out. And so I was weaning myself into a plant-based diet just because my body said, hey, this stuff hurts. My liver didn't like it. My body didn't like it. Right.
And just as a commentary, because I want to give in part two next week when we get into this in more detail, but just a little bit of a bit of science behind this. Animal proteins that we consume, and even if we just leave out the chemicals and all the processed things that are in them, it has to be processed by the liver. And the nitrous compounds on the animal protein has to be, neutralized. So it's converted initially to ammonia, and that ammonia has to be converted to urea, which then passes through the bloodstream. And so the liver has to work to do that. And so there's a process that the liver has to go through. So the cold pressed juices, I can imagine, are nourishing and hydrating you. And it's not causing the pain and work of digestion. And so I suspect that's, what sort of help you recover. It's interesting you said you would juice and then would rest. And rest, of course, is important. The body rebuilds. And so there's juicing, and then when you're not juicing, you're sleeping and resting and fasting, and you're letting the body heal itself.
Yes.
And so it's kind of a nice process that you described there that shows us, what was going on. And so what happened with the doctors? Now, you went to 3, they recommended different things. You turned them down. You had gotten sick. You had to go to Georgetown and get some IV antibiotics. At what point did you get to where you were completely away from the doctors? Did they call you? Did they follow up? What was going on in that regard in terms of your allopathic caregivers?
Well, the last one, the one that wanted to cut, burn, and shoot me up with chemo, he said, well, no, he actually scheduled me for an biopsy against my will. Right.
Okay.
And they called me and said, hey, when would you like to come in? I said, wait a minute. I didn't make this appointment. And he said, no, your doctor did. But I didn't request it. I didn't agree to that. And I learned by then to stay away from those doctors because they would pressure you. Every time I went to go back and visit them, they'll say, it's very important that you start this today or tomorrow. They were really high pressure. And you look at the white coat, and you look at the staff, and you look at the offices and the equipment, and he said, there's something in you that says these people know what they're talking about. But by then I've researched. I researched, and I got this nagging feeling that, hey, no, you don't. And then my dad had a surgery. My mom's had radiation. My cousin, 82-year-old cousin, by that time had chemotherapy, and all of them died.
Wow. So yeah. So all of that was going to get, but it's interesting that you said that you look at the white coat, you look at the environment, and something inside of you tells you that they know what they're talking about. So even all the research that you had done, there was a force. So you had to stay away from them. I mean, am I interpreting that correctly?
Yes, you are. And in addition to that, we're trained to rely on the doctors from birth. We're trained to do that. That's what everybody did, and that's what we did. And there's some very good things about the medical practice, medical science, very good things. But in this case of healing diseases,
Yep, yep. So that's fascinating. What Zora wants to know if you did the coffee enemas. Did you follow all
I did.
aspects of Gerson?
I did, and I still do from time to time. When I need that cleanse, I do. But it turns out to be there's a lot of caffeine. It's a lot of caffeine.
So basically, you get the bag, and then they have a detailed protocol, the different coffee
Yes.
enema protocols.
Mhm.
Did you think that was help? Did you sense that was helpful to you? I mean, obviously, you got.
I did. And the science behind it is that you have to eliminate these tumors while they're dying off. Your body's killing them off, but they will become toxic if you don't eliminate them. So you take these enemas every day. Now, I couldn't do the coffee as often. I just found it difficult to hold. But lemon and water, distilled water, of course. I'd do that, and I would eliminate chunks of stuff. And I got better within weeks. Within weeks, and
Wow, that's amazing. Better within weeks. Now that's quite amazing. So the other thing is that, and I'm going to show some images pretty soon of the tumor and then what happened after. So you started noticing very quickly, just on eating the food, the juices, that you started feeling better.
yes,
And it's not like, I mean, it was like days to weeks. I'm adding days. You said weeks, but
the days I started feeling better in days, really.
gotcha.
And I noticed that because the time that I had to rest in between tasks was less, and I would eliminate some of those rest periods, and I was able to function. And then I think and that was in October and February. I was really feeling good. In April of 2014, I was able to take some room air conditioners out of my shed and
Oh, wow.
install them on the second floor in the bedrooms by myself.
Wow.
Right.
That's amazing. What I want to do before we get to the images, I want to pause because you say some things that I think are very, very important because, and not to be too critical of the standard allopathic treatments, but, when you go through chemo and surgery and all these things, you're hurting. I mean, let's say hypothetically, because your natural approach, you got better, and let's say hypothetically the chemo and surgery and all that stuff could have gotten you better, but still the downside on those issues in that therapeutic arena is that you're not feeling good. I mean, you got chemo, you're sick, you're vomiting, you're in the hospital a lot. That maybe fever and whatnot. But here you're saying once you started doing these things, you started feeling better. And I don't think we should gloss over that because this natural healing process is one where not only you're healing, but you're feeling better in the process. I mean, the process is less painful. And you're not the only one that I've heard say that recovery. And so that's quite amazing. Let me do any other comments, Dr. Atkins, Dr. Palmer. I mean, this is an amazing story.
Sorry, I bounced in and out. It's thunder and lightning over here, so my internet went out. But
yeah, I'm hoping I'm not too far from you. See, I hear the same thunder and lightning.
I see that Zero asked about black coffee, and there's a whole lot of controversial information out there about enemas and coffee enemas and things like that, but Dr. Gerson has her own own coffee that you can purchase online that is their coffee specifically for enemas that you don't take orally. Right. You only use it for the enema. So just FYI.
Yeah, and that's a good point you raised because all coffees aren't created equal, and they probably source their coffee If they don't grow it themselves, I don't know, but they probably carefully source it. And I'm not sure if you want to just get coffee off the shelf. Not criticizing Folgers or anybody, but I think, but yeah, I think. So Nicole Caldwell, curious to hear, Dr. Montgomery, do you think that most oncologists have their hearts in the right place? They just don't know or believe in the power of nutrition. I think that's an interesting question. It's a complex one. And my answer to that evolves or has evolved. And, it's one thing to say we're all a bunch of evil bastards, and maybe that's some element of that. And I think it's probably more complex than we know, because there are a lot of factors involved. First and foremost, we're entrenched in a process and indoctrinated in a process, and so I suspect there's a level of brainwashing that is in part and parcel to that. And so, I think that's a big element, but I think it's reasonable to ask that question. I don't know. What do you think, Dr. Atkins? Are we just a bunch of evil bastards and just, don't care about the patient, or what say you regarding it? I'm going to put Nicole's question back up there so everybody knows what we're responding to. But I think it's a great question. Where are the hearts of our doctors, oncologists in particular, but doctors in general?
Yes, I think our doctors, medical doctors, are trained in the system, and so very with a strong emphasis on pharmaceuticals and traditional training and surgery and chemo. So they're not enlightened to or spend time in holistic type of approach or nutritional type of approach unless they take a detour. And so this is what they're taught. And so they're not exposed to it. And many times oncologists will say, eat whatever you want, it's no big deal, just take the chemo, and really putting your system at rest, your liver at rest with the juices, and not doing the cooked foods, as many cooked, especially meats and animal products, and more live enzymes can be very healing, as we found out. And so, but I just think doctors are not exposed to it. So you believe what you're trained in, and you invested your money and your time in. And so, I don't think it's evil, but that's what they believe. As far as the coffee enemas, coffee enemas are detoxifying of the liver, and so it's supposed to draw out the toxins. And basically, I don't think you always have to buy the Gerson's coffee, but you want a non-chemicalized coffee, more organic, etc. To do that. But there are a lot of information online about coffee enemas. I think the caution is some people get kind of addicted to it because they feel so good and overdo it. I'm not sure how many times you were doing, but some people will do it on the Gerson program multiple times a day. But you can flush out a lot of minerals and cause a mineral imbalance, if you're not hydrating with good minerals and juices. So I just want to caution the public not to overdo it.
Great point.
Can I add to Dr. Atkins? And so, to Nicole's question, I think also, being on the doctor side, we get to see a little bit closer. So my take on that is I look at my colleagues and I see that my colleagues are also sick. So doctors are sick also, and they're taking all of these medicines and they're doing these things to themselves. So I feel like they really believe in the system, and that the system is going to work for you because they believe it's going to work for them. And that's a little bit of the sad part, because there have been times when I've gone to a conference, which is a plant-based conference, and come back and kind of gotten some snide remarks about nutrition being quack medicine. So from a colleague, and that was kind of a running joke. but knowing that that colleague also has some medical issues and is taking a lot of medicines. So, you know, our colleagues are also suffering and doing the same thing to their own selves, to their own bodies.
That's a good point. One of the things I was doing at the same time that I was juicing and whatnot, I would have to relearn. I had to relearn everything about nutrition. And one of the things that I learned was how Rockefeller and other people started this delve into medicines and petroleum-based medicines and whatnot, and how they got away from things like chiropractors and natural doctors and homeopathic doctors, and how they basically made them bastards, made them quacks, just by the propaganda that they would promote in medical schools and in the public, period. But I researched other things. I researched what cancer was and the basis of all these other diseases. And so I had to simultaneously unlearn and relearn what the correct way of doing things was. And somebody liberated me. They said, don't scrimp on your health. Scrimp on everything else, but don't scrimp on your health. So I started spending money like crazy: juicers, Vitamixes, you know, books, videos. You know, I got a library. Video. YouTube is my friend. You know, and you know, I got even better with my research. Learned what doctors I could rely on, you know, and what ones I couldn't, just by what they were saying. And so I got into it.
Yeah, I like that comment. Don't scrimp on your health. Anything else? You know, patients often will tell me, oh, you know, the healthy food too expensive. I said, well, wear cheaper shoes.
Don't go out to these restaurants.
That's right. So one last question. I'm going to show some of these images. What kind of water do you drink? Do you drink distilled water?
Distilled water. Yeah, I put lemon or lime or both in.
And then tell us why you drink distilled water. That came up in an issue in another program I was in earlier today. But why do you drink distilled water?
Because I don't want any fluoride in it. I don't want any other chemicals in it. Spring water, it's part of the water table. And our water table has been severely polluted, along with our ocean water and river waters. It's just severely polluted. So I already had liver cancer. You know, I had liver issues and, you know, kidney issues and whatnot. And so I didn't want to put any of that stuff in there. If I want it in my body, I'm gonna put it in there. You know,
gotcha.
On purpose. So,
gotcha. That's a great point. I think that was the argument raised by another person I heard speaking. What have you? Let's see. Emily, so I was pretty much vegan, didn't feel good. Went to a cardiologist. She said I have a partial blockage, so I'm not starting keto 1 meal a day. Okay, interesting. So let me do this. We're really past our time, but let me share my screen. You know, liver cancer no more. I want to go through this, and next week, part 2, we're going to talk about a physician you met, Dr. Theodore Watkins, who worked with you, and we're going to get into more the nuts and bolts of your healing process. And we'll meet Dr. Watkins next week as a physician I had the chance to meet by phone this weekend, and I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. But here is, and I'm going to help us out with the imaging here. This is a CAT scan, and wait, this is the back, and this is the stomach, and the way to read this is that the feet are coming out at you, and the head is back on the other side of the screen, and the left side is over here, and the right side is over here. And so the liver is mostly over here, but it's kind of swollen. It kind of moves into some of these other organs you don't see, but you see this little mass right here. And there's an irregular shape there. So this was done in August 19th of 2013. So this is a CAT scan. So this was one of the imaging studies that were used to make the diagnosis. And so after you've gone through your process of juicing and healing, then we had this image, and basically it's just a little scarred area here. Mm-hmm. You don't see that mass anymore in the little homogeneous look of the liver. So we see a nice before and after image. Now, alpha fetoprotein, this is a busy slide. I'm not going to go through this, but I'm going to freeze it there for a minute. So anybody want to take a screenshot can take it and get that information. We'll talk about it maybe next week. But I do want to share some of the labs with you. This is a little bit busy, but the alpha fetoprotein level and right around the time of diagnosis, 205. It actually went up. You mentioned that you had gotten sicker some areas times, so it went up and then eventually came down, way down to the normal range. Normal range was 0 to 8.3. So it was high here, but by the time you got to 2018, it was really normal. But you were feeling better, even though it had not gotten to normal, but it had come down considerably. Now, as you mentioned, bilirubin, alk-phos, AST, ALT, these are the normal liver enzymes. And notice how most of them are not too far. Here's some of the high here, but then they're coming on down, and some are high here right around the time of diagnosis. I suspect before this time, they were all within normal range, but it was at the peak. You probably had some inflammatory type process going on here that these were abnormal, and same thing here. But I suspect we had labs before this, they were probably normal, and they came down to normal as well. Now, if we look at the alkaline phosphatase, which is part of the liver panel, and it's an enzyme. It can be elevated with mets to the bone, and a lot of it's related to high cell turnover. So it's not necessarily specific to any cancer or anything in the liver, but related to high cell turnover of some type. But you see here, it really went up very high. This is early around the time of the diagnosis, but then through your healing process, it came down. And this red bar represents the upper limit of normal level. And then here is the alpha fetoprotein level, kind of went up, and then you had that big spike, and it came down tremendous. So right about the time you were healing, even though it was probably a little bit barely abnormal, it was just off the scale here. And so you essentially have two different scales. It's almost a flat line there. So we have a situation where you clearly, the biochemistry and the imaging all go along with your body healing itself, and you were feeling much better as well. And so this is a very, very remarkable story and a very impressive story. So again, thank you for sharing with us. And what I want to do is I want to invite our guests to join us next week for part 2, because what I want to do is delve into the nuts and bolts of what you did. We touched on it a lot today, but we're going to have Dr. Theodore Watkins with us. We're going to ask him to introduce himself and share his approach. And then we'll have the two of you sort of take over the stage and talk about what you did in this process of your healing, because I think our audience will really like that and really get a lot of that. So any final words, Mr. Smith, today to lead us into next week?
It's doable. It's doable. I'm still healing from certain things, and there's some principles to healing, period, that we must all entail. We as a people, we've been through slavery, not just this time in America, but we've been in slavery up to 7 times in different parts of history, and that's a whole nother subject. So we're kind of misguided. So we have to get back to doing things God's way, de-stressing, prayer and meditation, eating good food, hanging around good people, people that are emulating what we need to be as. There's a whole series of things that we can get there, and we continue to grow. If we're not growing, we're dying. And so, trust me, I've been dead quite a few times.
You're like Lazarus, you come back.
Praise God.
Come back. Wow, I'll tell you one thing. That's with that, we'll end it on that note. We have a part 2 next week. You guys, I'll see you backstage as I close out. Again, thank you very much for joining us this evening. This is a remarkable story. You know, I take my hat off to Mr. Smith, and I really enjoy hearing his story in particular, and stories like this in general. What I want to do is I want to emphasize to you the bravery of him, the courage it took to in the midst of that diagnosis, because many times, and I've seen patients with diagnoses like cancer and other issues, they're not as calm and methodical. They don't necessarily reach out to God in the way that we all should, or a higher power, whatever higher power that we reach out to. And he did those things. And these are the steps that we take. You know, God put us through these things. When God put us through tribulation, he wants us to tribulate, not, Xanax 8 or whatever the case may be. But the key is that we should, take a deep breath, step back, and assess what our condition is. And he was analytical. I mean, he's a data-driven guy. He was analytical. He talked to different doctors. He looked at different approaches. He looked back and, analyzed what happened to his relatives. And then he looked at alternative approaches. So he was quite analytical in the approach, and he wasn't emotional. So he took it step by step. And I think his prayer gave him peace. I mean, there's biblical scripture that supports that theory. So I want to share with you that, whoever you are, whatever you're going through, it's not the end. I've treated many patients with severe illnesses, whether it's end-stage heart disease and liver disease and all of these things. And one thing I would like to convey to you is that it's not hopeless. Take a deep breath, reach out to God, ask him to give you the strength and ask him to give you the calmness and the peace to make the right decisions. If you take that first step, that's the first step to healing right there. Because when you give peace from God, from an outside source, from a power above you, that gives you the ability to make other rational decisions, and you do it without just running around and trying to just grab at the next best thing or whatever you think the next best thing is. So I think it's really important to understand that aspect of this. And so next week, we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of the healing process. We're going to meet Dr. Watkins, one of the doctors that worked with him during this healing process. And we're going to help you get some detailed information that may help you with whatever health issues you're dealing with. Until next time, keep it fresh, natural, and live.